Creative Space today, I'm having a conversation with Itzel O'Keefe, a Gen Zer who is as up on history as I am, or as well, she's actually probably more up on history than I am, but as interested in it as I am, because she is uh, a young person who is using her online presence to educate all of us about Antigua and Barbuda, and I would say Caribbean history as well. Welcome, Itzel.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Joanne. I'm really happy to be here.
I was so excited when I found your Instagram page, and I know you're on other platforms as well, YouTube and so on. Tell me how you got started and what led you down this path.
Well, I started in August of 2020, and I remember doing a project for tourism when I was in Antigua State College at 17. And the project had said to look up some places in Antigua, and I remember hearing about mermaid gardens, and I was like, mermaid gardens? What on earth is that? And I was very confused. And I was like, okay, so if I don't know about this, then that means other people probably don't know about this either. And growing up surrounded by culture, my sister Ashante O'Keefe sings calypso, my dad sings calypso as well. So I was always like really involved in that cultural sphere. And I knew that my singing voice was not going to cut it. So I was really happy to contribute to developing our culture and embracing history.
What's interesting about the Mermaid Gardens story to me is I discovered Mermaid Gardens a lot later than you did. I discovered Mermaid Gardens well, like almost more recently than in the past, and embarrassed to say so. That's why I'm not saying exactly when, but also realizing that as small as Antigua is, there's so many pockets of history that are unknown because it's kind of like you live in your neighborhood. I've been fortunate to explore a lot of Antigua, both for work and for play. And even I was like, Mermaid Gardens. But to people on the southeast side of the island, it's known, right? It's part,
Right.
but I'm from Otters. I believe you're from um
From
where you
between like Potters and Gamble's Terrace, so like Town and Potters.
okay. So what reason do we have to go out to English Harbor area apart from like Sailing Week, right? So we don't
Right.
know about the Mermaid Gardens. We're not hiking out there, but it's so
Right.
beautiful and it's so you could and for me anyway, when I went there, I could picture the mermaids hanging out there and just chilling and so on. So it's one of those realities that we don't know our island as intimately as maybe we should. What have been some other surprises for you? Some other discoveries since you started on this
Well,
journey?
so the first thing that I started doing when I began What's New was trying to find history, and it was surprising to me that it wasn't as easy as I thought it would have been. Um, I thought, I would be able to stumble upon some history, grab it and go. But it turned into more of a challenge than I expected. I remember going to the museum and having to pay for information, and I was like, and being a college student at that time, and just like occasionally working my part-time job as a reading tutor, I didn't have access to that many funds. So, it was it was a challenge to try to access this history that I wanted to share with everybody else. So I think starting What's New ANU was a way for me to share that history that I discovered with others for a little cheaper, for sure.
But I gotta say, I don't know, your tone, your style, you make it fun and accessible. Tell me about how you develop that approach or that engagement with the history. How you make it, I mean, you have all kind of influencers talking about, their makeup tutorials, there's fashion, there's all kinds of things, and you make history sit well in that space. Tell me about how you develop your approach.
Well, I I will have to say that when I first started, it was my sister who gave me that original push. She had said, hey, I think you can do this. And she's always been one of my biggest role models in life. So I have to always give her some thanks because without her, I probably would not have started this. Um, and for me, I think I try my best to convey history in the way that I would like it to be conveyed to me. So make it as interesting and fun as possible. And I think being a teacher helps a lot with that because I'm always constantly conveying new information to my students. And I'm always having to make new and innovative ways of expressing that information in a way that they understand. Um, so I do think that helps quite a bit with ensuring that I'm capable of doing that. For me, I always try to use what I watch, especially because I mean, being Gen Z, lots of media influences. Um, so I'm always trying to use what I'm watching to as inspiration,
Mm-hmm.
so that I can constantly rework my content and make it as the best that I can.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You mentioned you're a teacher. Tell me about that. You're teaching, but you're also at university right now?
Yes, I am at university right now in Trinidad. Um, and I am a teacher. I teach literacy. So reading, writing, comprehension, all of that, along with my sister at her business bill tutoring.
So, yeah, I see your point about how your professional life intersects with, I know you might think of this as play for right now, but I mean, influencing is a big business also. So I imagine that that's part of your ambition as well. Your
Definitely.
your your engagement with young people, presumably, I assume, primarily your students, yeah. Yeah, that I can see that coming through in the way you present your material because it's some of it is dark material. Has Let's talk about some of the things that you've discovered and shared, especially this being Black History Month and us needing to know a little bit more. I'm going to just throw out some things and you can respond. What is one of the darkest things that you discovered in your research that made you either rage or cry or something that made you also, for me, my feeling sometimes is just being grateful and impressed with what they were able to survive so that I could be here. So give me an example of one of those stories that resonated with you.
Well, at first, I do have to preface by saying that I definitely was feeling so much strong emotion when I first started, and it was difficult to navigate that like internal, you know, just rage for your ancestors because you want so much to for them to have a good life, you know, and you're reading their
It
stories
seems
and it's
impossible when you read some of
right.
what they've been through. It seems impossible. Like I'm
That's
not
when
that
it's
strong. How are they so strong? You know?
how did they do this? So for
Yeah.
me, it was awe-inspiring completely because I remember reading specifically about not sound, and that was the most shocking thing. I really love to shoot hard labor, and I remember reading the specific passage, and he was talking about how North Sound was one of the worst estates to ever that you could ever step foot on, and the disastrous treatments and the dungeons. And I was like, dungeons?
Mm-hmm.
Dungeons. Okay. And this woman getting mauled and eaten by rats. I
Hattie
said,
Bab.
no.
Hattie Bab. I learned about Hattie Bab in secondary school with the same book, To Shoot Hard Labor, and that is a passage from that book that has stuck with me because just to fill in the blanks for anyone who doesn't know the story, she was a worker at North South. They had to line up for roll call every day. You can help me fill in the blank. She had to, and the son of the overseer was the one who was like he's role playing when he saw his father did. And she's like, he's not my boss. I'm not gonna answer him. So she doesn't
Mm.
answer. So she doesn't answer, and she gets punished for that. But keep in mind, this is post emancipation, so she gets punished for that by being put in the dungeon. Two of which, by the way, remain, as far as I know. I've visited two of them on island. Um, the one at Parson Mall and the one at Orange Valley. And let me tell you, those are dark, dismal places. No air, just pure darkness, just vermin sneaking around. And she was in there. And
Exactly.
when they opened it to take her out, she had been eaten by rats. A whole
Yeah, it
woman.
was it was so shocking to me. I said, I cannot even begin to fathom that type of experience. And it's more than just a story, it's somebody's life and it's their experiences. And for me, the idea of Papa Sammy growing up during that time, having witnessed and heard about these experiences, these people's lives, I cannot imagine how terrified I would feel of every day,
Just
you know?
existing, yeah.
Exactly.
I'm getting kind of out there with it, but I do believe we still carry some of that trauma in our bodies. I do believe that. How would you put it? How did you, was that one of the stories that you put across? And how do you then make that story into a capsule?
Well, I hadn't gone specifically into it in a video, but I did go into it in a post. So I tend to occasionally I do various types of content. So sometimes a carousel, which is like a picture on Instagram with multiple slides. So I have a series called Dark History, and it's like a history of the places that persons don't usually think about having any type of history or any type of dark history. So I did Country Pond, Botanical Gardens, and North Sound. And when I went through North Sound, I had done, I had mentioned Harty Bab, and her being accused of disrespecting master, resisting beating, and then thrown into the dungeon. So I didn't go into as much detail as I could have because I usually tend to do that in longer form content. But I had started off to try to reel in some interest and get persons to kind of acknowledge that dark history first before we go into it, because I feel like it's important to kind of give. I even had I think a trigger warning because it's so dark and it's hard to acknowledge that this is a life that our ancestors went through. And for me, it feels like, okay, this is my auntie. Like that's my auntie Hattie, and this is what she going through, you know what I mean? I can't believe. So for me, I try to broach these topics really gently at first and then go into it in longer form content. Another big discovery for me was that some people knew that villages had numbers for the plantations. And that for me, I didn't know that. So when other people knew about it and they were like, oh yeah, my village's number, I said, excuse me, your village's number what? And I think especially
Explain what you mean by that. Break that
so
down.
I know Bath Lodge had so basically since all of the villages had cane fields, they each had a number. So the locomotives and stuff would be able to pass by and all of these things.
Locomotives, or locals, ran on tracks through many of our villages, from Villa to Point, Cedar Grove, Jennings, Willow Keys, and even North Sound. Today, I'm taking you on a trip down memory or history lane. Hurry, Jack, cause local come.
Yeah. And it also like I think is really interesting that some of the names as well are like immortalized in time because we refer to the place as an estate. So I right now live in Carlisle's estate. And that for me was very shocking because I was like, I live on an estate.
All of those places still bear those names. All of those places still name. I live in Clarks Hill. I grew up in Otters. These are estate names. We don't think about it, but we should. And we should consider if we need to have a conversation about renaming these places. I know we will resist because me from Willie, me from this, we're accustomed to where we're from and
Exactly.
we will resist, but we need to have that conversation, don't we?
Exactly. I completely
So,
agree.
what is
Right.
something that you learned in your research that you resisted learning? Like you felt like, no, no, no,
Okay. I think I'll need to think for this one. Um, a big one I think would, and it's controversial. I have to give that warning at first, is about religion
no.
and
Okay.
learning a bit about what led to us taking a more active part in um the religions that we see today. So
Okay.
being Methodist, Catholic, Anglican, and how they came to our country. And other parts of the Caribbean and sort of indoctrinated persons a lot more. And I do believe that persons, especially in Antigua, before had, you know, had beliefs, they had other separate beliefs, because I remember reading about how superstitious everybody was and how they used to do this and used to do that, and things that today would be frowned upon. And people would say, oh, what kind of thing you're working over here, and introducing these religions started to make these things fade out a lot more. So I remember reading about Methodism and okay, so in the earlier days, the Methodists came, and the other religions that were more prominent, so Anglicans, they were very against the Methodists because they were sympathizing with Black people, and they were trying to teach Black people things and get them into schools and teach them how to read. And this was very frowned upon. And it kind of created different, I want to say, like, a rivalry between the various denominations in the country.
I've read about the churches coming in, even the ones that try to educate and empower, socialize us, I guess, into their way of being a little bit. They still, when I read books like Troubling Freedom by Natasha Lightwood, and you realize that they were still trying to control you in a lot of ways. They were giving you this thing, but in order to get this thing, you had to be this way or else. That was also, so it's complicated. Let's put it that way.
Yeah,
it's complicated. And if the people in the churches don't want to hear that because they have a sanitized idea of what the church history with
exactly.
When you were in school, do you find that there was as much engagement, like they engage, okay, to the level of your interest and excitement about history now? Did the school do anything to feed that when you were in school?
Unfortunately, no. I attended Antigua Girls High School, and I guess I didn't have the best experience. I remember giving some more lore on Antigua Girls High School, it being the most prestigious school. And I remember my grandmother telling me that she fought tooth and nail to make sure my aunts and my mother got enrolled into high school. I remember hearing from Mrs. Mannix, who kind of runs the library in Antigua, about how she was, always very proud of her alma mater, and reading, and everybody, before I started high school, everybody was like, high school, you have to go to high school. And you're drilled, that was drilled into you day in, day out, so that you would know, here's where I'm going, and it felt like a letdown when I started, because it wasn't like how they described it to be. And I didn't feel like I got the same education my parents would have gotten. More than anything else, one of the reasons why I was not interested in history when I went to high school was that it was never about me.
We were never centered. And I mean, credit to our folk historians who have been trying to fill in the blanks over the years since. But it did feel, I agree with you, like it wasn't about me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So 2 more things. Tell me, so we talked about the darkness and the things that you resisted. Tell me something that sparked joy in terms of a discovery, one, and something that clued you into how smart and ingenious our people were.
Okay, so one thing that definitely sparked joy was learning about more traditions with Antiguan history. So I remember learning about, in, I think, Willoughby Bay, there was the Fun House, the Great House, and the Leap House. And I'm going to talk about that in a future video as well. And there were these 3 houses with tunnels that you can go to get between them, so little columns. And I remember hearing about the leap house, and then the leap house on the leap year, you know, everybody, you have drums beating, and I can just, it's always so interesting to picture that, like the drums beating, you know, women on one side, men on one side, and you know, they're away from each other, nobody can see each other, and they just have to jump out when the time hits 12, and that's when they know they're getting married to this person for the rest of
Oh,
their life,
wow.
you know?
Okay. And a moment of ingenuity that impressed you?
I will say, the woman healers, the woman healers. Oh my gosh. For me, women are so powerful. And I remember reading about how the plantation owners, when persons who were their family got sick and their doctors were not able to provide the resources that they needed, they said, okay, well, call up the woman healer from the Black people then. Now she can come help after what we've done is not working out. And they came in and they did that, you know. They made sure, and they were so relied upon because their methods worked, you know. And that for me was so, just, I felt so rewarding, and it also felt like I wanted to get more in touch with more traditional practices as well.
All right, I'm going to give you a few seconds to plug what you're doing. Just basically tell the people where they can find you and what they will get when they come there.
All right, so I am very excited to introduce What's New ANU. It is the home of all Antiguan content, and you can find me on Instagram, a little bit on Facebook, and on YouTube, where I have a video of interviewing Trevor for Worry and the whole history behind Worry as well.
Even in those days, the game used to be like a royalist game. Ordinary men and women had to basically hide to play it. It is the oldest board game known to man, and that game has withstood the test of time. But is Worry dying?
So be sure to find me on Instagram at What's New ANU. Type it in and you'll be sure to get into the history, the lore, the culture, and a little bit of more modern experiences in Antiguan life and culture.
And is there anything for the future that you want to plug as well?
Yes, I think by the time this interview comes out, I would have done a video on Polkstead Streets and the history of that throughout the years. So becoming more of a scandalized, you know, having that more scandalized perspective, and it being
for the non-Antiguans, Polkstead Street is our de facto red light district.
Yes, it is. And that for me, you know, that's what I grew up knowing it as. So I'm doing a video kind of detailing the backstory and how it became more of the promiscuous area that it is today.
All right. I am so excited that you exist in the world out there doing the thing. I am so, like, I can't wait to see where you go with this, because we need this. We need this. As we kind of orient who we are, what our value system is, as we grapple with the new world and new challenges, we need to be grounded in who we are. And that's the importance of the work that you're doing. So thank you. Thank you for the work that you do, and thank you for coming on to talk with me about it today. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate you, and I wish you good speed as you continue the good work.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here, and thank you so much for this opportunity. I hope I get to see you again soon.
Definitely, definitely. Till next time.